Ladies and gentlemen, Undersecretary Burns, distinguished guests, friends, it is really my pleasure to welcome you to the 2011 American Foreign Service Association AFSA Awards Ceremony. My name is Ian Houston. I'm the Executive Director of AFSA. Regrettably, Secretary Clinton will not be able to join us today due to a scheduling conflict at the last minute. We extend our best wishes to her, and AFSA certainly is honored to have Undersecretary Burns participating in this ceremony. We are grateful to have the use of this room, this beautiful room and lovely room bearing the name of Benjamin Franklin. I think it's true that many of you have special memories and moments here in this room. And I think Dr. Franklin would agree that the true beauty of any room and the energy of it really, after all, stems from the people who occupy it at any given time. And today, that is you. And so welcome, friends and family, colleagues. It is a privilege to associate with you. AFSA also welcomes members of the media who may be present. We certainly are very grateful for the BNet services that are being provided. We appreciate the role you all play in drawing attention to diplomacy, development, and the Foreign Service. It is now my pleasure and my honor to turn the program over to Susan Johnson, the elected president of the American Foreign Service Association, a career Foreign Service officer. Susan has such a wide array of leadership experiences in her time of service, and AFSA is quite fortunate to have Susan at the helm. Susan has truly made a tremendous impact, and please welcome Susan Johnson.
Thank you, Ian. I would also like to warmly welcome you all to this special occasion. Today, we are really honored to have Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, Bill Burns, with us to present the Lifetime Contributions to American Diplomacy Award to Ambassador Roz Ridgway. Welcome, Bill. And please accept an enormous thank you from AFSA and the Foreign Service for all the great work that you have done, that you are doing, and that you will be doing in your next assignment as Deputy Secretary of the Department. AFSA looks forward to working with you. It's also a great pleasure to welcome Secretary of Transportation Ray LaHood, who's a member of the William R. Rivkin Award panel. Thank you, Secretary LaHood, for your support of AFSA's Dissent Awards and for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. I would also like to welcome and thank the Director General of the Foreign Service and Director of Human Resources, Ambassador Nancy Powell, for her great support and assistance for this annual AFSA event and more. Ambassador Powell is a longtime member of AFSA, and I've greatly appreciated the opportunity to work with her over the last 2 years and look forward to continuing that over the next 2, and also with her superb team. No AFSA president could do better. We also warmly welcome, and I'm looking for him, but we expect him to be here, but we warmly welcome Pat Kennedy, who we are very fortunate to have as Undersecretary for Management. Nancy and Pat have always been strong supporters of AFSA, and our thanks goes out to both of them. It's also a particular pleasure to welcome and to recognize all former AFSA award winners who are here today, including 3 former recipients of AFSA's Lifetime Contributions to American Diplomacy Award. The Honorable Frank Carlucci, former Secretary of Defense, the Honorable Ambassador Tom Boyat, and the Honorable Ambassador Bruce Langen. Finally, we cannot begin our formal program today without paying tribute to 3 outstanding practitioners of diplomacy. former Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger, Ambassador Richard Holbrooke, and Ambassador Richard Parker, all of whom passed on in the past year. They were extraordinary diplomats and patriots. Secretary Eagleburger and Ambassador Parker were both former recipients of the AFSA Lifetime Contributions to American Diplomacy Award, and it's fitting that we pause here for a moment at this ceremony today in memory of these remarkable American diplomats. Thank you. Now for a few words about history. This ceremony marks the 44th anniversary of AFSA's awards program, which began in the late 60s with the William R. Rifkin and the W. Averell Harriman Awards for Constructive Dissent. Through the years, AFSA has added additional awards. This afternoon, we present 4 awards for exemplary performance: the AFSA Post Representative of the Year Award, the Avis Bolin Award, the Nelson B. Delavan Award, and the M. Juanita Guess Award. These 4 performance awards recognize Foreign Service personnel and family members at their best, contributing actively to our collective corporate mission, shoring up morale at post, and providing unique and compassionate services to Foreign Service colleagues and family while advancing the interests of the United States and of the Foreign Service. We will also present this afternoon 3 awards for constructive dissent: the William R. Rifkin, the Christian A. Herter, and the F. Allen Tex Harris Award. And I'd like to take a moment to recognize Tex Harris, who's also with us here today. Tex. AFSA is proud to honor constructive dissent and the ability to express it appropriately without negative consequences to the dissenter. Such a tradition is fundamental to the health of any institution. Where it does not exist, the institution loses vibrancy, morale is undermined, and effectiveness damaged. What distinguishes the professional from the careerist is the willingness to speak out if, after careful study and reflection, one is convinced of the value of an alternative policy to our national interests. J. William Fulbright once said, "In a democracy, dissent is an act of faith. Like medicine, the test of its value is not in its taste, but in its effects." Constructive and well-reasoned dissent is rooted in our fundamental values. AFSA honors and seeks to promote a corporate culture that not only tolerates, but encourages informed, thoughtful, and principled argument over policy issues. As Ambassador Tom Boyett, one of the lifetime contributions to American diplomacy recipients, has said in an insightful article on dissent in the Foreign Service Journal, the Department of State is the only place in the U.S. federal government, and probably in the world, which has established a formal and institutionalized mechanism for official dissent, the dissent channel. This channel has been used for more than 40 years to convey differing views on sensitive policy challenges, and some of the messages submitted have resulted in policy changes. And Ambassador Boyett has also rightly noted that dissent is about national interest, not about individual worldviews. AFSA Dissent Awards recognize Foreign Service personnel who offer constructive criticism and alternative policy options up through the chain of command. It is important for us in the foreign affairs agencies to give voices of advocacy or disagreement the attention they merit. Each year, AFSA also honors the commitment of the individuals after whom these constructive dissent awards are named: William R. Rifkin, Christian A. Herter, W. Averell Harriman, and F. Allen Tex Harris. Now, it's my great privilege and honor to introduce Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, Bill Burns. Bill has had an exemplary Foreign Service career, serving as ambassador to Russia and Jordan, as Assistant Secretary for Near Eastern Affairs at the NSC, as the Acting Director of Policy Planning Staff, and he has received about every award the department has to offer. As I previously mentioned, Bill has been nominated to serve as the next Deputy Secretary, and AFSA is pleased to have a career Foreign Service officer at the highest level of our Department of State. Bill's presence here today recognizes the important role AFSA plays in honoring lifetime service to American diplomacy, the courage to dissent, and excellence in performance. And we thank him. Bill?
Thank you very much, Susan, and good afternoon. It's wonderful to be here with all of you today. I'd like to begin by expressing my deep appreciation to AFSA for your truly tireless work for the men and women of the Foreign Service. This is an inspiring event every year, full of stories of outstanding effort, of moral courage, and of diplomacy done right. So to all of our award winners, I'm so glad to have this chance to thank and congratulate you in person. All of you exemplify the very highest values of public service. In 1995, as Susan said, AFSA established a Lifetime Contributions to American Diplomacy Award. Past winners have included George H.W. Bush, Frank Carlucci, Larry Eagleberger, Cyrus Vance, George Shultz, Lee Hamilton, Tom Pickering, Tom Boyett, and Bruce Langan. In other words, this is truly a rarefied group. And today I have the distinct honor of welcoming an extraordinarily deserving new member. When I entered the Foreign Service in 1982, Roz Ridgway already loomed large in this department. She was famous as a fierce and singularly talented negotiator who created an entire body of international law on ocean resource management and won hard-fought victories for victims of communism and of Nazi Germany. In the years that followed, Roz cemented her reputation as one of the very best of her generation. As Assistant Secretary of State for Europe and Canada, she led the interagency team supporting President Reagan and Secretary Shultz through all 5 Reagan-Gorbachev summits. Each time, she served as lead negotiator for the Joint Summit Statement. I won't repeat what is in the history books about her performance, but I will read from a letter that George Shultz later wrote to Roz. And I quote, "I remember vividly so many occasions from the years we served together when, with your steady hand, steel backbone, and creative thinking, you pulled rabbits out of hats. Your all-nighter at the conclusion of the first Reagan-Gorbachev meeting created an outstanding joint statement that was a real triumph. The next morning, I said to one of the Soviets whom I had known for a while, 'What a great statement, the product of lots of give and take.' And he replied, 'Yes, we did all the giving and you did all the taking.' But Secretary Shultz concludes, 'But it wasn't we, it was Roz Ridgway.' These were some of the most important negotiations of the Cold War. We came as close as 2 nuclear powers ever have to agreeing to eliminate all nuclear weapons, and Roz Ridgway was at the very center of our efforts. Of course, Ambassador Ridgway also engaged in another negotiation against long odds as a woman in a male-dominated foreign service. She was one of just 6 women in the entering class of 1957. Women could not even marry and serve until 1970. Roz, undaunted, proved her mettle at every turn. She became not just respected, but truly indispensable, and women diplomats ever since have benefited from the trail she blazed and the mentoring she generously came back to offer. The nature of a lifetime of achievement is that it is difficult to summarize in a few short minutes. Roz served with distinction as ambassador to what was then East Germany and to Finland, ambassador for Oceans and Fisheries Affairs, and counselor of the Department of State. She served as president and co-chair of the Atlantic Council. She spent the last 16 years as chairman of the board of the Baltic American Enterprise Fund and then the Baltic American Freedom Foundation. Roz is a pioneer. More than that, she is simply one of the very best at the very difficult work that we do. From fishing wars to the Cold War, Roz Ridgway has set the gold standard for excellence. Tough, brilliant, committed, and capable, Roz is an extraordinary role model for all of us. And now I am deeply honored to invite her on stage to accept the AFSA Award for lifetime contributions to American diplomacy.
Somewhere up here, I have prepared remarks, which are probably going to be very hard to get through after all that. Thank you. Ambassador Burns, President Johnson, Secretary LaHood, Ambassador Powell, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends. I'm deeply honored by this award, and as I look at the distinguished diplomats, Secretary Carlucci, Ambassadors Boyat and Langen, who are among those who have preceded me as recipients, more than slightly taken aback. Indeed, as I think Susan Johnson can attest, when she called to tell me of my selection to receive an award for lifetime contributions to American diplomacy, I said something along the lines of, "You gotta be kidding." I have recovered from that moment, and needless to say, I'm deeply grateful to the American Foreign Service Association for such an extraordinary recognition. With me today is my husband. I knew this was going to happen. Retired Captain Ted Deming, whom I first met at a negotiating table. I don't know whether it was about salmon or halibut or tuna. He says it doesn't matter, it was in Mexico. But he has been a colleague, a friend, a staunch support, and a partner ever since. It seems but a few years ago that I left home on a June day to journey to Washington to join the Foreign Service of the United States. I find that construction a kinder, gentler way of putting it, rather than it is now more than half a century since I left Minnesota for a career in diplomacy. I'm not going to put you through all the assignments or memorable events, then I went there and then I did this, but I have reflected on those years over a few moments while preparing for this occasion, and the early days do come to mind. Like the time in Manila when we all wondered if U.S.-Philippine relations could stand the onslaught of an LBJ advance team. Or in Sicily, when an entire island went into mourning over the death of President Kennedy, and our consulate team stood for hours as long lines of people came to sign the condolence book. There was even the time in Norway when the Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines invited the women of the embassy to a resort weekend to assist in the social education of the officers selected for the line's new ships destined for the American tourist trade. And finally, a memory of more serious content. A night to dawn meeting in New York between Secretary Shultz and Soviet Foreign Minister Shevardnadze. The arrest in Moscow of American journalist Nick Danilov, clearly in retaliation for our arrest of a Soviet spy in the United States who also had no diplomatic cover, created a real threat to the Reagan-Gorbachev dialogue initiated in Geneva the preceding year. It was in danger of coming undone. The press was howling. The daily press conferences and the nightly TV news centered on the question, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to respond? Inside the administration, the whole ideological war over whether we should even talk to communists, much less meet with them, broke out again. It went on for weeks. We needed peace and quiet to untangle the mess, get Danilov out of Moscow, and proceed with the undertakings agreed to in Geneva. I don't know if it could be pulled off today, but we got a meeting scheduled for 11 p.m. at the Soviet mission in New York, and a very special Foreign Service officer who sort of goes deep undercover as the current Undersecretary for Management, found us the oldest, ugliest, crummiest station wagon on the streets of New York and drove us to that meeting. Believe me, no one gave the vehicle or its occupants a second glance. We met at the mission until dawn and emerged to find our car and our driver waiting to return us unnoticed to the delegation hotel. When the package we started to put together that night was completed and carefully wrapped, it contained the release of Danilov and his departure from the Soviet Union, the release and departure from the Soviet Union of numerous human rights activists and dissidents, and a summit meeting in a place named Reykjavik. I'm not trying to turn this into a positive version of a story of a nail and a horseshoe and a battle that was lost, but it does illustrate that very often an element of critical importance gets lost in the larger event. Those of us who have organized motorcades, stopped to turn and run the copy machine, departed from the rear of the aircraft carrying the briefing books, and yes, made the coffee. And in one case, even secretly removing chairs from the delegation hotel to provide seating at a summit table where the need for a place to sit had been overlooked. We know the relevance to what the Foreign Service does of that unlikely, incredible piece of junk on wheels and the driver who sat through the night. And that's enough in the way of memories. It was okay to be a liberal arts graduate in my day, and the Foreign Service offered an opportunity to live history, to be next to the events of those times, and to serve my country. Naive, perhaps, but true, and it did not disappoint. The years leading up to my emergence on the scene, as many of you know, as Tuna Raz, were about acquiring the skills that a diplomatic briefcase must contain. And then the truly hard work began. Diplomacy is, to a very large degree, equal parts substance and stamina. In the world of oceans and fisheries, it was tens of thousands of miles and difficult and angry counterparts, domestic politics, the Hill, and important constituencies, and please don't forget to mention the fish. The United States was acting without the support of international law, and our own state legal leadership objected when we suggested to the Japanese, who wondered about our view of international law, that they consider our position anticipatory international law. We had to call it something. We did our best to put together a comprehensive regime to the world's oceans and its resources that would be acceptable to the United States Senate. And I'm sure that every time that Secretary Clinton has to take up the challenges of melting Arctic ice, she wishes that we had succeeded. There were fewer miles, but just as many late hours involved in the years of the Reagan-Gorbachev summits, in particular preparations for and the unfolding of Geneva and Reykjavik. I left the Foreign Service shortly after the end of the Reagan administration. Ironically, and perhaps with some clairvoyance, after all of those years as a so-called Cold War warrior, I was traveling in Asia when the wall came down. Not long thereafter, the Soviet Union dissolved. We've had trouble defining the world that emerged from the end of the Cold War. It has been the post-Cold War world, the post-Cold War period, and some have even risked calling it the New World Order, although the order part seems to elude us. And that brings me to my conclusion. The issues affecting our country's interests keep coming around. We may manage them, but seldom resolve them comprehensively once and for all. The ocean resources and maritime boundary challenges that took me around the world are with us today in the Arctic and elsewhere, and in the sad decline of the world of fisheries. The US-Soviet four-part agenda of human rights, arms control, regional conflicts, and bilateral issues such as trade stands as background to the effort today to reset the relationship with Russia. The success of the enterprise funds created to respond to the opportunity to assist in strengthening democratic institutions and market economies in East and Central Europe suggests new ways to approach dramatically different circumstances now scattered around the world. The decades-old question, whither NATO, is still popular, but the evolving answers are increasingly difficult to find, and one wonders, has whither NATO been asked for the last time? It was whither NATO, or what ho Europe, that took me to Turkmenistan in the 90s, where I learned two things as I traveled. First, that the eastern boundary of Europe is somewhere in the middle of the Caspian between Baku and Ashgabat, but not much farther than that. And second, as has always been the case, successful diplomacy is about people. People in the Foreign Service, people associated with such as the Baltic American Enterprise Fund or the Atlantic Council or the CNA Corporation. Ashgabat at that time was as weird a dictatorship as one could find. I met representatives of the new generation of our diplomats now serving our country. Intrepid, bright, courageous, staffing new embassies and new outposts, building relations with new countries, new leaders, new forms of traditional governance, addressing old issues in new forms and new issues in old forms. I was reminded of the early 60s when so many nations in Africa first came to the scene as the colonial period ended and diplomats of my generation successfully met many of the same challenges. I have a practically parental regard for what our Foreign Service is doing today and enormous respect for the sacrifices that its members and their families are making to get it done. In accepting this award from AFSA, well aware that any contributions I may have made were not mine alone, I would say thank you to the caring colleagues who created the opportunities and to the dedicated colleagues who worked with me to realize them. Thank you.
Well, I'm sure everyone shares with me the great appreciation to Roz, not only the admiration for her achievements, but for sharing both her memories and those perceptive reflections on the practice of diplomacy. So thank you, Roz. We need more of that. So thank you for your contribution. Undersecretary Burns is able to stay a bit longer, but if he does have to slip out at some point, it's because the other duties are calling. But thank you, Bill. Now, we will start by giving out our 4 performance awards. And I'd like to just move forward with this right away and invite Lawrence A. Fields to come to the podium to receive his award for AFSA Post Representative of the Year. To you.
Wow, it's great to be here, and what a tough act to follow. Congratulations, Ambassador Ridgway. Thank you, President Johnson, and our very capable vice presidents, representatives, and staff here at AFSA, with whom it's been my pleasure to work as AFSA rep for the past 3 years. I'd also like to thank all my colleagues at U.S. Embassy, Kathmandu, Nepal, and especially Ambassador Scott DeLisi for their valued support. I also want to recognize my mother and my stepfather and some of my friends who managed to come. Thank you so much. At a time where public sector unions have fallen victim to the vagaries of the political process and become buffeted by the shifting winds of public opinion, AFSA more than ever serves a crucial role in representing the Foreign Service, both on Capitol Hill and to the wider nation at large. I'm honored to receive this award for representing such a reputed professional association, and it's a privilege to represent my esteemed colleagues at U.S. Embassy, Kathmandu. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Larry, and we really appreciate those kinds of dedicated post reps around the world that Larry so well represents. The next 3 awards honor exemplary performance, those who have gone above and beyond in their roles. These individuals are being recognized for their contribution to the mission of United States diplomacy worldwide. We start with the Avis Bolin Award. I'd like to invite the daughter of the late Avis Bolin, Ambassador Avis T. Bolin, to come forward to present the award to this year's winners. Yes, that's plural.
Thank you, Susan. It's always a great honor for me to present this award in honor of my mother, established by the late Pamela Harriman, to honor those unpaid members of the Foreign Service, the spouses and family members. And this year we are very fortunate to have two absolutely outstanding awardees. Marie Terry Farrar, who comes to us from the U.S. Interest Section in Havana and who was really a very inspiring example of what can be done in a not very promising environment. Terry, will you come up the award?
Thank you, Ambassador Bolling. Thank you, AFSA. Thank you, President Johnson. I would like to introduce today my husband, the love of my life, Jonathan Farrar, and our children, Melissa and Nathaniel. Young Jonathan couldn't be here today. I'm humbled by the recognition, but I would like to accept this award on behalf of our community in Havana, as well as on behalf of all the Foreign Service spouses who worked silently and tirelessly to advance U.S. diplomacy around the world. Thank you very, very much.
Our second awardee today is Charla Chaudhry, from Moldova, from the embassy in Chisinau. And unfortunately, she could not be here to accept the award, but her children will accept it on her behalf, Brianna and Rishan. And again, we have a truly inspiring
I just have a short letter from my mom. She wanted me to read this to you guys. It was over a year and a half ago that I first went to Ternova to see a tuberculosis rehabilitation center that was housing over 220 children. What I saw, black mold in all buildings, windows that freely let in the wind, roofs that leaked with every storm, the front of the girls' dormitory building literally breaking away, no working toilets, no clean water supply, and a heating system that was rarely, if ever, dependable, left me shaken and angry and knowing in my gut that I could not walk away from this and do nothing. Along the way, I was joined by Counterpart International, EU-COM Military Forces, LDS Humanitarian Fund, a North Carolina gentleman by the name of Ray West, SIDA, a Moldovan architect and his team of volunteers, our own U.S. Embassy Chisinau, and so many others. Somehow my anger and frustration turned into a sea of compassion that enveloped this project and transformed Ternova into a safe and healthy home for these children. My Ternova project became a journey of many lessons. The children of Ternova know for sure that they are not forgotten, and they do indeed have value. I have surely seen that any one of us can accomplish miracles if we believe that anything is possible. I am so grateful to the AFSA committee for selecting this project and its children to such a special honor as the Avis Bolin Award. I think it is also a special tribute to the FSN at our embassy, who took it upon herself to put together this nomination, and who did this because she said it demonstrates that we can all do great things. My husband and I will be departing Chisinau this summer, leaving behind amazing people and memories, but I leave Chisinau knowing that it was here I experienced maybe one of the most important moments of my life. And truthfully, this award is forever a reminder of that time. Thank you.
I now invite John Clements, President of Clements Worldwide and son of Juanita Guest, to the podium to present the M. Juanita Guest Award.
Well, I'm here to introduce Michael Vining, the Klo of Mongolia. Michael is just truly a remarkable person, tireless, and really believes that anything's possible. And if you have an opportunity to catch up with Mike, please ask him about the Thanksgiving turkey story, because it's a great, great story. Michael?
Gotta do what they say.
Thank you very much. Thank you. First, I would like to say what an honor it is to receive this very prestigious award. I am deeply grateful and humbled by my selection. I would like to accept this award on behalf of the tremendously dedicated and talented people that make up the U.S. Embassy Ulaanbaatar. This is a small embassy with a big heart and passion for its mission. Ambassador Adelton has created a mission environment that motivates everyone to work together to succeed. From the embassy leadership team, to its support staff, to the locally engaged staff, to the family members, our small embassy generated a lot of outreach and community engagement. It was my good fortune to work in a position that allowed me to organize and give shape to the wealth of ideas generated by this fine team. I would like to thank everyone at FLOW for their support and guidance, to all of the CLOs with whom I have collaborated, to AFSA for this award, to my wife, who, as everyone knows, is the wind beneath the wings, basically, of every CLO, and especially to Mr. Clements for making this generous award possible. Thank you.
One thing this award ceremony does is to give us an opportunity to hear these great stories about what the good work that's going on around the world in our embassies. So thank you. It's now my pleasure to invite Ambassador William Harrop to the podium to present the Delavan Award.
Thank you, Susan. In about 4 decades at the Foreign Service, my wife Ann and I learned that an individual in any mission in which you work who is absolutely indispensable is the office management specialist, or whether called senior secretary, executive assistant, special assistant. That individual holds a mission together and is a person whom I don't think diplomacy could be done without. I'd like to introduce Rehme, who is, for that reason, I might say, we are particularly pleased that the Delavan Foundation is able to give this award every year to an office management specialist. I'd like to ask Rehme to come up. She's done wonderful work in this role in South Africa.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the American Foreign Service Association for selecting me as this year's recipient of the Nelson B. Delavan Award for exemplary performance by a Foreign Service Office Management Specialist. I'm deeply humbled to have been selected for this honor, and I'm grateful to Ambassador Donald H. Gibbs and Helen Laline, Deputy Chief of Mission at Mission Pretoria, who recognized my contributions and nominated me for my efforts. I'm grateful for my family members who could be here today. My husband, known widely as Mr. Jerry, my mother Norma, sister Lynn and her husband John, their children Erica and Ben, and to all the friends, current and former colleagues also here today for their encouragement and support. I would especially like to acknowledge Tom Brennan, who is also here today. It was Tom who suggested, over the course of many years, I consider joining the Foreign Service. After at least 10 of those years, I finally took his advice, and here I stand today. Thank you, Tom.
The next 3 awards are AFSA's Constructive Dissent Awards, which recognize Foreign Service employees who have demonstrated intellectual courage, initiative, and integrity in the context of constructive dissent. I'd like to call Tex Harris to the podium now to present the F. Allen Tex Harris Award.
Dissent in the Foreign Service is about leadership. Leadership from the top. Several years ago, Larry Eagleburger stormed this stage and interrupted this ceremony to give us one of his impromptu implorements to dissent, to give the Foreign Service and this nation the very best ideas that one had, even if they were not acceptable to one's peers and one's superiors. Leadership is also in the work of Anne and Bill Harrop, who more than a dozen years ago recognized that these dissent awards were missing something critical: recognition of the outstanding work being done by the specialists in the Foreign Service, and they rectified that. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Ann. Dissent is also leadership on the ground. And this year's recipient, Mo Visani, proved that in spades. He came to Surabaya as the first American IRM information officer and was given responsibility for making sure that the consular agent in Bali, who ever thought we would have a consular agent in Bali, was able to send information about Americans, their passport numbers, their birth dates, their social security numbers, in a secure channel. Well, there was a little bit of confusion because that was not done. Consular agents around the world were given a laptop and a cell phone and a ballpoint pen, period. He got IRM and he got DS to agree, but when CA was approached, they understood the large ramifications of empowering all the consular agents around the world to have access to the open net, and balked. He did not balk, he kept fighting. And in the end, he won and the policy was adopted. The joy is that once the policy was adopted, everyone said, my gosh, this makes sense, we should have done this a dozen years ago. So that is the fine example of dissent today. Mo, we appreciate your momentum in getting this change done. I'd very much like to invite Catherine Ebert-Gray to accept an award from Mo, who is on his way back from Surabaya.
Okay, now the vote.
I'm honored to be here to represent Maurizio Visani, with whom I shared a very lively tour in Manila recently. I'm also sorry you don't have the chance to meet him because he's truly an exceptional officer. Watch his name through the years. I told him he was crazy to miss this regal ceremony, but he told me it was a choice of a 27-hour flight back or a vacation back in Bali. So between sips of a frozen beverage, he said you'd understand. But in fact, he does truly deserve this award. And when I asked him, what can I say on his behalf? He said, please explain that this was truly teamwork, and that he accepts this award on behalf of the many colleagues at Post who assisted him, on behalf of IRM, who helped make this happen, and on behalf of Consular Affairs, who, of course, were right there by his side as he tried to make this all happen at Post. So on behalf of that entire team, I wish to thank AFSA and Tex Harris for this award on Mo's behalf. Thank you.
I now call Ambassador Charles Rifkin to the podium to present the William R. Rifkin Award. This award is presented in memory of his father, the late Ambassador William R. Rifkin.
Thank you, President Johnson. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I want to start by acknowledging the presence in the audience today of the judges for the William Rifkin Award, starting with the Honorable Ray LaHood, U.S. Secretary of Transportation, former Rifkin Award recipient, the Honorable Ambassador Tom Boyott, and William Rifkin's oldest son, my brother, the Honorable Robert S. Rifkin, General Counsel of the Transportation Department, who's here with what I hope will be a future Foreign Service Officer, Alex Rifkin. Now, this is the 43rd year that my family and I have had the honor of presenting the Rifkin Award here at the State Department, here in this beautiful room. For 43 years, I've had the chance to read about the extraordinary and the courageous men and women of the Foreign Service through the award nomination. But for the past 2 years, I've had the ability to witness their achievements firsthand as United States Ambassador to France. Now, never in my life have I been more proud of what our Foreign Service officers do on a daily basis. They work selflessly, often without recognition, to promote America's values and interests around the world. And this is particularly evident in this year's William Rifkin Award winner. While working as a political officer in Tokyo, Joel Ehrendreich sent a dissent cable when he learned that no U.S. government official had ever attended the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Ceremony in the past 59 years. Now, the intent of that ceremony was simple: to comfort souls of those people whose lives were lost due to the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. But the politics behind our government's decision not to attend are a little bit more complex. So as Joel's nomination stated, Joel believed that attending this event was in line with American values and consistent with our past practices, and participation in other ceremonies such as Iwo Jima or Okinawa or, in fact, Normandy. Joel believed that our continued absence from Hiroshima perpetuated a stigma that somehow the atomic bombing was too sensitive a topic to be touched by American foreign policy. Now, at the ambassador's request at the time, Joel presented his case to the country team at Embassy Tokyo. And one by one, all 20 members of the team, all 20 of Joel's colleagues, stated publicly in front of the U.S. ambassador why they disagreed with him. But thankfully, Joel was stubborn, and although the dissent cable was sent 6 years ago, he never gave up on his argument, and his consistent pressure played a large part in Ambassador Roos's recent decision this year to attend the Hiroshima ceremony for the first time in U.S. history. Now, this decision strengthened U.S.-Japanese relationships at a critical moment in time and caused many other nations, including France, by the way, to follow our lead. In fact, I spoke to Ambassador Roos last night and told him about this award. He wishes he could be here but can't. And he was saying that in Japan, even with its current problems in Fukushima, people still come up to him and thank him for our government's decision to attend this ceremony. As Robert Kennedy said in 1966, few men are willing to brave the disapproval of their fellows, the censure of their colleagues, the wrath of their society. Moral courage is a rarer commodity than bravery in battle or great intelligence, yet it is the one essential, vital quality for those who seek to change a world which yields most painfully to change. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to present this year's William R. Rifkin Award to Mr. Joel Ehrendreich.
Well, Ambassador and the Rifkin family, who I just had the pleasure of meeting briefly right when we walked in, thank you so much. I'm just blown away. You know, I tried to do my homework and read up about this award, an award that Tex Harris mentioned to our A100 class, you know, I'm not going to say how many years ago, but a long time ago. And I've tried to read up on it, and I'm just humbled to be on the same list as Ambassador Boyett, and I'm humbled to be in the same program as Ambassador Ridgway. I'm never going to throw that away, I tell you that. I'm just blown away. I know I just played a small part. I really want to commend Ambassador Roos for actually doing what I just thought about. It's really him that deserves much of the credit. And I know Jim Zumwalt at the DCM and Tokoko Shiranita, the FSN, who, like everywhere else, the one who really makes it happen. She played a role in making it go much more smoothly than I think anybody had anticipated it would be. It was not nearly as controversial as people had feared. I'm glad my children could be here, Cooper and Calvin, today, not just because their old man's winning an award, but I hope you can see all these remarkable other people who are winning awards today and learn from their model, you know, that if you do stand up for what you believe in, and if you commit yourself to excellence over time, sooner or later it will be appreciated. Unfortunately, my wife, who everybody remember, when you meet my wife, you forget about me. Fortunately or unfortunately, she couldn't be here. She's still working at our embassy in Singapore on the 4th of July celebrations. She's my inspiration. This is as much a love story as anything else. Usually when I think I'm right and the rest of the world's wrong, she'll say, "No, Joel, you're wrong, and the rest of the world's right." In this instance, Susan said we think about this a lot, and consider these, how to dissent on these. In this case, I thought about it for about a split second, and I said to Rachel, "Am I right on this or am I wrong?" And she said, after a split second, "No, we should be going to Hiroshima." And so, as with anything else in my life that has been substantive that I've succeeded on, it was her inspiration and her support that got me through. So I wish she could be here. Really, from the very beginning, my whole hope was that the U.S. would be on the side of praying for everlasting peace. That's the other goal of the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Ceremony. I think we can all be proud that now we are. And so, again, congratulations to us for going to Hiroshima. Thanks.
Well, thank you to Joel, and thank you to Ambassador Rifkin for both of your remarks. Now, it's my pleasure to present the Christian Herder Award. This award is given in memory of the late Secretary of State to a senior Foreign Service officer who has exhibited extraordinary accomplishment involving initiative, integrity, intellectual courage in the context of constructive dissent. AFSA is very pleased to welcome this year's winner, Dr. James Bayuk, to the podium. Dr. Bayuk.
This here. I have 2 minutes. Thank you to AFSA. And I'm looking at an audience of dissenters. My wife, my children, my friends that I've invited here, my fellow Foreign Service officers, with varying degrees of constructive success. I know because I've invited you here to share this 2 minutes, and every person in government has something they can see around them that we could do better. So thank you for coming. I have a true story. There was this job that I wanted, and I knew the person who I thought could help get me that job. And so I went to him and asked for his support. In that EER counseling sort of tone, he looked at me and said, "Jim, I can't support you for this position. You're outspoken, you're opinionated, and you don't take no for an answer." And I said, "But what are my bad qualities?" And then he went on. He said, "Jim, you remember that project that you wanted to do one way, and I wanted to do it a different way? And you just wouldn't let go of that, and you kept on insisting that your way was the best way to do this." That was 13 years ago. I didn't get that job. Worse than that, that project never happened. Never even got started. Not his way, not my way, not any way. It still needs to be done. And 13 years later, we still have medical care that we could make better. Fortunately, the Constructive Dissent Award does not require you to be successful. And so, if you read the little note they said there, it says, I'm not always successful, yet. So I have a brief message to my fellow dissenters. You know how to speak. You've done that. Now learn how to listen. Learn how the other person sees the problem. Recognize that incremental change is also success. Offer solutions and offer to own these processes. This is an institutional operation. This is something that we recognize for working within the system. In my perfect world, this award would not exist. I thank AFSA for holding the space to acknowledge the importance of speaking out and offering solutions. There should not need to be an award for that. That should be our job, and the voice should be welcomed. Having said that, there are way bigger things in the State Department portfolio that need a place for constructive dissent than what I have done, and I hope that next year those voices are there and that they get acknowledged. We are an organization whose internal culture is very much about getting along. Confrontation is not easy. Dissent, by its nature, means that you are not usually in the majority. And that voice and agreement with the direction we are going. So, I want to close by acknowledging my fellow dissenters with a gift of my own. Ha, I found him. I was in Mozambique last month, and I'm looking at the desk of the chargé, and I'm having a little visit with him, and he has this cup, which is a really very nice cup. And I look on the other side of it, and it says, "Without dissent, it's not America." Now, if there is room, I know it would say, without constructive dissent that is valued, it's not America. But clearly there wasn't room. So to my fellow dissenters here at this award ceremony and to you in the audience, I encourage your voice, I encourage your candor. I encourage your willingness to speak out, to keep speaking out, and to provide solutions. Thank you so very much.
You want some help with all that? We need extra hands. You got it all? Congratulations. Well, that brings this part of our celebration to an end. I would like to thank you all for coming today. I would like to also invite you to stay to celebrate the occasion and to help yourself to beverages at the back of the room and to have a chance to meet and get to know some of the others among us that you've met on this occasion. And I see the photographer would like to invite the winners to this side of the room for a group photograph. So thank you all, and this brings the ceremony to a close.